My business partner fired me after 20 years. He never saw my ultimate comeback plan. The mahogany gleamed under the harsh glare of the executive suite lights, reflecting the triumphant smirk that stretched across Julian Thorne's face. His words, delivered with a theatrical flourish, sliced through the air, sharp and precise, echoing slightly in the vast, almost cavernous room. Silas, my dear friend, after 2 decades of partnership, I'm afraid this is where our paths diverge. Effective immediately, your services are no longer required at Innovatech Solutions. A heavy silence settled, thick and suffocating, yet Julian seemed to savor its weight. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, a picture of smug satisfaction. Silas Vance sat across from him. In the very office he had helped build brick by metaphorical brick, in the very chair that had become a second home during countless sleepless nights. His hands rested calmly on his knees, a picture of stillness. No outburst, no desperate pleading, no trace of anger. Just a quiet, almost imperceptible nod. Julian's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his usually self-assured features. He had anticipated a struggle, perhaps even tears, certainly a torrent of indignant fury. Instead, he met a profound stillness that seemed to absorb his victory, rendering it incomplete, almost irrelevant. The lack of reaction was, in its own way, a challenge he hadn't prepared for. You understand, of course, Julian continued, recovering quickly, his voice regaining its smooth, persuasive timbre, the practiced cadence of a seasoned salesman. It's purely a strategic decision. Innovatech is moving into a new era, a more dynamic era. Your contributions, while foundational, have become somewhat stagnant. Innovatech needs agile leadership, a public face, someone who can truly connect with the market. And, frankly, that's never been your forte, Silas. He gestured dismissively around the opulent office, a room filled with gleaming awards, framed patents, and sleek prototypes. Many of those achievements bore Silas's name, or were the direct result of his relentless intellect. Yet Julian now claimed them as his own, a mere backdrop to his grand pronouncement. Innovatech needs to evolve, and sometimes evolution requires difficult choices. Julian's eyes, usually so calculating, held a glint of something akin to pity, a performance he was undoubtedly giving for himself as much as for Silas. It was the detached, almost clinical pity of a surgeon discarding a tool no longer deemed useful. He had orchestrated this moment meticulously, over months, perhaps even years, weaving a narrative of necessity and progress. He believed he was closing a chapter, sealing his legacy as the sole visionary, and discarding an inconvenient relic of the past. What he couldn't grasp, what his self-absorption prevented him from seeing, was that he wasn't closing a chapter at all. He was unknowingly opening Pandora's box. He believed he had won, that he had stripped Silas of everything. He didn't know the game was far from over. He didn't know Silas had already won, long before this meeting even took place. Silas's gaze drifted to the framed photograph on Julian's polished mahogany desk, a younger Julian and himself, standing awkwardly, grinning widely, beside the very first server rack they'd ever bought, 2 decades ago. The memory was a distant echo, a ghost in the gleaming, sterile room. The initial spark, the shared dream, had long since been extinguished by Julian's insatiable ambition. I understand, Julian, Silas said, his voice low, steady, betraying no hint of the intricate, meticulously woven web of plans simmering beneath his calm exterior. The words were genuine, in a twisted sort of way. For Julian's best would soon become Silas's ultimate advantage. Julian had just set Silas free, unknowingly releasing the very force that would redefine his future in Innovatech's. He just hadn't seen the ultimate comeback plan, and he never would, until it was far too late. To truly understand that moment in Julian's office, the quiet certainty in Silas's posture, the profound chasm between what Julian believed and what was real, one needed to understand 2 decades of a meticulously unbalanced partnership. Julian Thorne and Silas Vance had founded Innovatech Solutions on a shared dream, a fledgling idea born in a cramped garage apartment amidst the aroma of stale coffee and soldering fumes. Their initial visions for that dream, however, diverged almost immediately. Silas Vance was the quiet architect, the relentless innovator, the one who saw problems as intricate puzzles begging for elegant, often counterintuitive solutions. His mind worked in algorithms and logical progressions, crafting the revolutionary software and hardware that formed the very backbone of Innovatech's early success. He thrived in the solitude of development, in the focused pursuit of technological perfection, drawing profound satisfaction from seeing a complex problem yield to an elegant code. Julian, on the other hand, was the charismatic frontman, the master of the pitch, the networker extraordinaire. He could, it was often quipped, sell ice to an Eskimo, and then convince them they needed a bigger freezer and a service contract to maintain it. He was the face, the voice, the public persona of Innovatech, dazzling investors and charming clients with his boundless energy and captivating rhetoric. In the beginning, it truly seemed a symbiotic relationship. Julian brought in the deals, the capital, the visibility. Silas built the products that delivered on Julian's promises, and then some, often exceeding expectations. Their complementary skills seemed to guarantee success, a perfect blend of visionary and builder. But as Innovatech grew, so too did Julian's ego, expanding to fill every available space, leaving less and less room for recognition of Silas's contributions. Julian began to perceive Silas's quiet nature not as dedication, but as weakness, his preference for the lab's focused solitude, not as profound concentration, but as disinterest in the important aspects of the business. He relished the spotlight, soaking up every accolade, every industry award, often omitting Silas's name entirely from acceptance speeches. If Silas was mentioned, it was usually a fleeting, almost condescending acknowledgement of his technical genius before Julian pivoted back to his own grand vision. Julian would casually dismiss Silas's nuanced technical explanations in client meetings, preferring to simplify and sensationalize, often at the cost of accuracy. Silas worries about the nuts and bolts. He'd quip with a dismissive wave, a practiced smile on his face. I worry about the vision. The vision, of course, was always Julian's alone in his telling. Silas tolerated it. For years, he tolerated it. His profound belief in the company's mission, in the revolutionary technology they were building, outweighed the sting of Julian's dismissals. His passion was the innovation itself, the elegant solution, not the ephemeral recognition. He made countless sacrifices, working through late nights, missing family events, pouring every ounce of his intellectual energy into solving complex problems that kept Innovatech ahead of the curve. He was often the last one in the office, meticulously debugging, optimizing, refining, ensuring every line of code was robust, every system secure. Meanwhile, Julian would be out at lavish dinners, on exclusive golf courses, or at high-profile industry events, charming potential investors and closing deals, while Silas was busy ensuring they had a product actually worth investing in, a foundation strong enough to support Julian's soaring promises. The turning point, the genesis of Silas's secret weapon, occurred about 5 years prior to his eventual firing. Innovatech was facing a critical challenge. Their core data processing architecture, while robust for its time, was becoming inefficient, struggling under the sheer volume of information their growing client base generated. Competitors were beginning to chip away at their market share with newer, faster, more scalable solutions. The company's growth was being stifled by its own success, bottlenecked by outdated infrastructure. Silas had spent months meticulously researching and conceptualizing a radical overhaul, a complete re-architecture built on a novel distributed ledger system that had been gestating in his mind for years. It was audacious, complex, and required a significant upfront investment in R&D, but it promised a leap forward, not a mere step. Silas presented his findings to Julian with meticulous detail, a comprehensive report outlining the long-term benefits, unparalleled speed, unhackable security through cryptographic protocols, and a modularity that would allow Innovatech to adapt seamlessly to any future data demands, effectively future-proofing their core business. Julian listened, his expression growing increasingly impatient, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the polished conference table. "Silas, this sounds like another one of your academic pipe dreams," he'd scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "We need quick wins, not 5-year research projects. Our investors want quarterly growth, not some abstract future-proofing. We'll just patch the existing system, throw more servers at it. It's cheaper, faster." His short-sightedness infuriated Silas. It wasn't just about immediate profit. It was about the integrity of their technology, the very soul of the company he had helped forge. That meeting was a revelation, a moment of stark clarity. Silas realized Julian would never truly value groundbreaking innovation if it didn't yield immediate, visible returns. Julian saw technology as a mere means to an end, a way to generate revenue. Not as an end in itself, something to be perfected and pushed to its absolute limits for the sheer elegance of the solution. Julian prioritized image and sales figures over fundamental technological superiority. It was then that Silas made a crucial decision, a silent vow that would reshape his destiny. If Innovatech was going to stagnate under Julian's leadership, his intellect, his passion for innovation, would not. He would continue his work, the groundbreaking research that Innovatech truly needed, but he would do it in secret, entirely independent of the company. His secret weapon wasn't a physical object, but a conceptual leap, a paradigm shift. It was a revolutionary data processing and security protocol, far beyond anything on the market. It didn't just optimize existing systems. It fundamentally reimagined how data could be stored, accessed, and secured, making it exponentially faster, undeniably more secure, and infinitely more scalable than anything Innovatech, or their competitors, possessed. He called it Nexus Core. For 5 long years, Nexus Core became Silas's clandestine project, his refuge from Julian's increasingly frustrating management style and the superficial demands of Innovatech. He worked on it during late nights when the office was empty, in the early mornings before anyone else arrived, and through countless weekends. Even his vacations usually involved him holed up in a secluded cabin with a high-spec development server, poring over code. He used his personal funds for specialized hardware, for advanced software licenses, for anything that could accelerate the project. And he leveraged his deep network of trusted, brilliant minds, former colleagues who shared his vision, old university professors who admired his intellect, even a few disgruntled ex-Innovatech engineers who, like Silas, felt stifled by Julian's superficiality and lack of technical understanding. He brought them in under strict NDAs, presenting the work as a personal research project, a passion pursuit that might one day find a niche. They were paid well, of course, a quiet testament to their skill, and their excitement for the sheer audacity and elegance of the project was palpable. They were true believers in the technology, not just in the potential payout. Crucially, Silas meticulously documented every line of code, every design choice, every architectural decision. He filed patents for the core algorithms and protocols of Nexus Core, not in Innovatech's name, but meticulously in his own. It was a slow, painstaking process, requiring a level of subterfuge that went against his naturally transparent and honest nature. He learned to compartmentalize, to smile and nod at Julian's latest pronouncements about superficial upgrades or new marketing campaigns, while his mind was racing with the elegant solutions Nexus Core offered to the very problems Julian refused to acknowledge. Silas knew this technology was transformational. It could solve the very problems Innovatech was increasingly grappling with: data bottlenecks, nascent security breaches, scalability issues, problems that Julian's superficial patches and more servers approach were barely containing. He even tried, on several occasions, to reintroduce elements of Nexus Core to Julian, disguised as minor upgrades or new features to existing Innovatech systems. Each time, Julian would dismiss them as over-engineered, unnecessary complexity, or too expensive for the immediate return. Julian's blindness was Silas's greatest asset. He was too focused on the immediate, the superficial, the public image, to see the profound value Silas was creating right under his nose. By the time Julian fired him, Nexus Core was not just a concept. It was a fully functional, rigorously tested, and patented system. It was ready. All it needed was to be unleashed onto an unsuspecting industry. Julian thought he was cutting Silas loose, severing a dead weight, eliminating an inconvenient reminder of Innovatech's humble origins. In reality, he was cutting the final cord that bound the most disruptive technology in the industry to his sinking ship. He had just handed Silas the keys to his own undoing. Julian's grand pronouncements about Silas's irrelevance resonated only in his own echo chamber, a self-congratulatory bubble. For Silas, being fired was not a setback, but a profound liberation. The shackles of Innovatech's stifling bureaucracy and Julian's intellectual myopia were gone. His plan, years in the making, now moved from clandestine development to overt execution. The calm demeanor Silas displayed in Julian's office wasn't feigned. It was the quiet confidence of a chess master who has already envisioned the checkmate, who sees the board several moves ahead. The first few weeks were a blur of meticulous organization and controlled intensity. The patents for Nexus Core, already secured in Silas's name, were his unassailable foundation, a legal firewall that protected his years of clandestine work. He immediately incorporated a new entity, Vance Innovations, a name that, while simple, carried a weight of quiet defiance, a statement of purpose. His initial capital came from personal savings, carefully managed over 2 decades, and a few strategic, discreet investments from individuals who had long respected his work, often in secret, and who were eager to back a genuine innovator unburdened by corporate politics. These weren't typical venture capitalists looking for quick flips, but seasoned tech veterans, industry stalwarts who understood the profound potential of Nexus Core, recognizing its truly disruptive nature. They knew Silas's reputation for integrity and brilliance, a stark contrast to Julian's flash. Silas's immediate priority was assembling a team. Julian had, over the years, systematically overlooked and undervalued some of Innovatech's most brilliant engineers and data scientists, preferring those who echoed his rhetoric rather than challenged it. They were the ones who truly understood the depth of the company's technical challenges, the ones who had quietly shared Silas's frustrations with Julian's leadership and his insistence on superficial fixes. Silas didn't have to poach. He merely opened a door. A discreet message sent through his network, an invitation to a private, confidential meeting, and the offer of genuine intellectual freedom, a chance to work on truly innovative problems, and a stake in a genuinely revolutionary project. The response was overwhelming, a testament to Silas's quiet reputation for integrity and technical prowess. Among the first to join was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant AI specialist whom Julian had sidelined because her long-term, foundational research didn't align with his immediate profit goals. Evelyn had been close to resigning anyway, stifled by the lack of vision. Then came Marcus Chun, a cybersecurity expert whose warnings about Innovatech's growing vulnerabilities had repeatedly fallen on Julian's deaf ears, dismissed as fear-mongering. Marcus longed to build truly impenetrable systems, not just patch-porous ones. And finally, Sarah Jenkins, a tenacious operations manager who had witnessed firsthand Julian's managerial chaos and the resulting internal inefficiencies, and who believed fiercely in streamlined, effective processes. They were a small, but formidable, team, each a master of their domain, bound by a shared belief in genuine innovation and a quiet, almost unspoken understanding of Julian's profound shortcomings. Their new office was intentionally modest, a sleek, functional space in a less ostentatious part of the city. No mahogany, no opulent artwork, no grand executive suites. Just whiteboards covered in complex equations, high-spec workstations humming with quiet power, and the focused energy of minds truly engaged. Here, under Silas's direct leadership, Nexus Core moved from its final development phase to commercial deployment. They refined the user interface, ensuring it was intuitive despite the underlying complexity. They created robust integration tools, making it seamless for new clients to transition. And they initiated a rigorous beta testing program with a select group of industry contacts who had been eager for a truly transformative solution, desperate for an answer to their own growing data problems. Julian, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware, encased in his bubble of self-congratulation. He saw Silas's quiet departure as confirmation of his insignificance, proof that he had removed a drag on Innovatech's progress. He'd hear whispers that Silas was setting up something small or dabbling in consultancy, and dismissed them with a dismissive chuckle and a wave of his hand. His arrogance blinded him to the subtle shifts in the industry landscape, the quiet rumblings of discontent among clients, the growing frustration of his own technical staff. He was too preoccupied with maintaining Innovatech's public image, with chasing new, flashy, but ultimately superficial projects that yielded quick, albeit unsustainable, revenue spikes. Innovatech, without Silas's foundational technical guidance, began to falter more visibly. The patches Julian had insisted upon were unraveling at an alarming rate. Data breaches became more frequent, system downtimes more prolonged, and the overall performance of their core products lagged further behind the market. Clients, once loyal, started to express their dissatisfaction, their complaints growing louder and more insistent. Julian's usual PR spin and charismatic charm couldn't fully mask the fundamental technical deficiencies. He began to blame market shifts, unforeseen global challenges, even legacy systems inherited from previous management, a thinly veiled jab at Silas's past contributions. He increased marketing spend, doubled down on sales efforts, trying to outrun the underlying rot. But the rot was systemic, deep within the very architecture, and only Nexus Core could truly address it. Silas observed Julian's struggles with a detached, analytical calm. It wasn't schadenfreude, not a malicious pleasure in Julian's misfortune. It was simply the inevitable consequence of his choices. Every public announcement of an Innovatech system failure, every news report of a competitor gaining ground, every frustrated client testimonial was a quiet validation of Nexus Core's necessity, a testament to Julian's profound misjudgment. Silas's plan wasn't about revenge. It was about demonstrating the profound value of true innovation, value that Julian had persistently ignored and ultimately discarded. While Julian scrambled to put out fires with increasingly ineffective methods, Vance Innovations was quietly building bridges. They secured a handful of pilot projects with companies that were suffering from the exact inefficiencies and vulnerabilities Nexus Core was designed to solve. These weren't just clients. They were strategic partners, influential players in the industry, companies whose success was paramount to the wider market. Once they experienced the transformative power of Nexus Core, they would become powerful, authentic advocates. Silas and his team worked diligently, methodically, ensuring every deployment was flawless, every integration seamless. The results were immediate and undeniable. Processing speeds increased by orders of magnitude, security vulnerabilities vanished, and scalability became virtually limitless. Their partners were not just impressed. They were astonished, their initial skepticism replaced by fervent endorsement. The silence from Silas's end was deliberate, a strategic void. It allowed Julian to continue his self-deception, to believe he had emerged victorious from their separation. Julian was so focused on the external noise, on projecting an image of unshakable success, that he failed to notice the foundational tremors beneath his feet. He never looked back, never considered what Silas, the quiet genius he had so carelessly dismissed, might be doing. He never saw the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, because he was too busy admiring his own reflection in the calm, albeit stagnant, waters of his perceived triumph. The stage was being set, not by Silas's direct manipulation, but by the natural progression of cause and effect, by the undeniable superiority of his ignored innovation. And the grand reveal was fast approaching. The industry buzz was almost deafening, a palpable hum of anticipation and speculation. The annual Global Tech Summit, held in the sprawling convention center, was the stage for the year's most anticipated announcements. Julian Thorne, ever the showman, had secured the coveted keynote slot, the opening act of the entire summit, promising a groundbreaking new direction for Innovatech. The rumors were swirling. A massive new marketing campaign, perhaps a strategic acquisition, anything to stem the bleeding from their increasingly evident technical woes. Julian, clad in an impeccably tailored suit, strode onto the stage, a confident, almost arrogant smile playing on his lips, completely oblivious to the fact that his carefully constructed world was about to crumble. He basked in the spotlight, convinced of his own untouchable brilliance. Silas was there, of course, not in the main hall, not vying for attention, but in the adjacent, smaller auditorium, where Vance Innovations had secured a modest but strategically timed presentation slot immediately following Julian's keynote. His team, Evelyn, Marcus, and Sarah, were all present, a quiet collective of calm anticipation, their expressions mirroring Silas's own serene composure. There was no nervousness, only a profound sense of readiness. Julian's speech was a predictable mix of hyperbole and vague promises, a masterclass in corporate jargon. He spoke of synergistic paradigms and disruptive ecosystems, showcasing slick, pre-rendered animations of features that were either still in conceptual stages or merely superficial upgrades to an aging, creaking infrastructure. He pointedly avoided any mention of the glaring technical challenges plaguing Innovatech, instead focusing on optimistic market share projections and future growth that seemed increasingly detached from reality. The audience, largely composed of industry analysts, eager investors, and potential clients, listened politely, but there was an underlying current of skepticism, a collective knowing glance. They knew Innovatech was struggling. Julian's bravado felt increasingly hollow, like a grand facade hiding a collapsing building. Then, Julian made his critical error, an offhand remark intended to solidify his perceived victory over Silas, to cement his narrative of a company shedding dead weight. Some individuals, he declared, his gaze sweeping across the vast auditorium, lingering for a moment as if searching for a ghost, struggle to adapt. They become mired in old ways, resistant to progress. Innovatech, however, has shed those constraints. We are nimble, forward-thinking, unburdened by historical baggage. He paused, allowing a subtle, knowing smirk to cross his face, clearly referencing Silas's departure. A ripple of quiet murmurs went through the crowd as the implication became clear. He believed he was burying Silas. As his keynote concluded to polite, but unenthusiastic, applause, Silas made his move. The transition between presentations was tightly choreographed. Silas and his team walked onto the smaller stage, the lights dimming briefly before illuminating a single, elegant podium. His appearance was in stark contrast to Julian's flamboyant display. Silas wore a simple, well-fitted dark suit, his demeanor calm, his gaze direct and unwavering. There was no fanfare, no bombast, just quiet, understated presence, a focus that commanded attention. "Good morning," Silas began, his voice clear and steady, amplified just enough to fill the space. "My name is Silas Vance, and for 20 years, I was the co-founder and lead architect of Innovatech Solutions." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Many recognized the name, but few had ever seen him speak publicly, his preference for the lab keeping him out of the spotlight. Julian, still backstage, likely preparing for his VIP reception, basking in the lingering illusion of his triumph, would not have heard this. Not yet. "He is here today," Silas continued, his voice gaining a quiet intensity, a profound conviction. to introduce Vance Innovations and our flagship platform, Nexus Core. The screen behind him lit up, displaying a clean, elegant logo, a stylized, interconnected network, a symbol of the profound architecture he had painstakingly built. For years, our industry has grappled with the same fundamental challenges: data processing speed, uncompromised security, and true scalability. Many, including Innovatech, have tried to address these issues with incremental improvements, with patches and superficial upgrades that merely mask deeper, systemic flaws. His words were not accusatory, but observational, delivered with the quiet authority of someone who understood the core problem intimately, someone who had lived and breathed these challenges. Then came the reveal, the moment of undeniable truth. Nexus Core is not an incremental improvement. It is a fundamental re-architecture of how data is managed, secured, and accessed. It is a system built from the ground up to be exponentially faster, undeniably more secure, and infinitely scalable than anything currently available on the market. As Silas spoke, the screen behind him transitioned to a live demonstration. His team, behind the scenes, was running real-time simulations, comparing Nexus Core's performance against industry benchmarks, including Innovatech's own struggling systems, which were publicly known to be slow and prone to failure. The numbers flashed on the screen, stark and irrefutable: processing speeds that were orders of magnitude faster, a leap in performance that seemed almost impossible, security protocols that withstood every simulated cyber attack with unwavering resilience, a modularity that allowed for seamless integration and unprecedented adaptability to future demands. The audience murmured, then gasped. This wasn't just an upgrade. It was a revolution, a complete paradigm shift. Silas then introduced Dr. Evelyn Reed, Marcus Chun, and Sarah Jenkins, allowing them to briefly explain the technical underpinnings with precision and clarity, their quiet expertise a stark contrast to Julian's earlier showmanship. They spoke with the authority of true innovators, not just salespeople. The room buzzed with excitement, a palpable energy building. Questions poured in, sharp and incisive, and Silas and his team answered each one with calm authority, revealing the 5 years of meticulous, secret development, the rigorous testing, the already successful pilot programs that validated their claims. And then, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle, the checkmate move. Furthermore, Silas stated, his gaze sweeping across the now captivated audience, his voice firm and resonant. Nexus Core's foundational protocols and algorithms are fully patented, exclusively under Vance Innovations. He paused, letting that sink in, letting the full weight of the statement resonate. The implication was clear, devastatingly so. Innovatech, the company Silas had helped build from the ground up, could not simply copy this technology, could not adopt it, could not even license it without Silas's explicit permission. It was his. Just as Silas finished, a commotion erupted at the back of the auditorium. The doors burst open with a crash, and Julian Thorne stood there, his face ashen, his triumphant smirk replaced by a look of utter disbelief, quickly morphing into furious, uncontrollable rage. Someone, an aide or an industry peer, must have informed him of Silas's presentation, of the unprecedented buzz it was generating, of the devastating implications. He had likely dismissed it as a minor inconvenience, a desperate last gasp from a discarded partner. But the energy in the room, the stunned faces, the palpable excitement, it told him everything. He saw the impossible numbers on the screen. He heard the hushed, excited whispers. He understood the crushing finality of Silas's patent declaration. The very solution he had dismissed, the technology he had cast aside as an academic pipe dream, was now being presented by Silas, his former partner, as the definitive answer to the problems that were crippling his own company. Julian's eyes met Silas's across the crowded, buzzing room. His face contorted, a mask of betrayal, fury, and dawning horror. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, to lash out, but no words came out. He was utterly, completely blindsided, stripped bare in front of his peers. The master manipulator, the charismatic showman, was for once speechless, his carefully constructed facade crumbling to dust. He had just witnessed the public unveiling of his company's obsolescence, delivered by the man he had contemptuously fired. The checkmate was complete. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of controlled chaos for Vance Innovations and utter pandemonium for Innovatech. As Julian stood frozen at the back of the room, his face a grotesque mask of shock and fury, the audience erupted. Journalists scrambled for their phones, their fingers flying across keypads. Analysts furiously typed notes, their eyes wide with the implications, and investors began to make frantic, hushed calls to their firms. The air crackled with a palpable shift in power, a sudden, brutal reordering of the industry landscape that would be remembered for years. Julian, unable to process the magnitude of what he was witnessing, finally turned and stumbled out of the auditorium, his usually confident stride replaced by a defeated, almost shuffling gait. The golden boy had fallen. For Vance Innovations, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Silas's presentation had gone viral within minutes, the news spreading like wildfire across social media and industry forums. News outlets ran headlines proclaiming a technological earthquake and Innovatech's unforeseen downfall. Silas's calm, data-driven delivery, combined with the undeniable efficacy of Nexus Core's live demonstration, resonated deeply with a market desperate for genuine solutions. Inquiries flooded in, from major corporations, from venture capital firms suddenly eager to invest, from top talent within the industry who recognized a true leader. Vance Innovations had, in a single hour, gone from a quiet startup to the hottest, most talked-about name in tech. The fallout for Innovatech was catastrophic. The stock plummeted, wiping out years of growth in a matter of hours. Investors, who had watched Julian's keynote with skepticism, now saw his bluster for what it was, a desperate, hollow attempt to mask a decaying core. Board members called emergency meetings, their anger palpable. Julian's carefully cultivated image as a visionary leader shattered, replaced by the public perception of a myopic, arrogant executive who had discarded his greatest asset, blinded by his own hubris. Whispers among Innovatech employees turned into shouts of frustration and resignation. Many, who had secretly admired Silas's work and quietly resented Julian's superficial management, began to jump ship. Some reached out to Silas directly, not out of malice towards Julian, but out of a genuine desire to work on something truly innovative again, to be part of a company that valued substance over show. Silas accepted several, not to spite Julian, but to strengthen Vance Innovations with talent that understood the unique challenges of the industry and shared his passion. Julian, Silas heard through the industry grapevine, became increasingly erratic and isolated. He tried desperately to dismiss Nexus Core as vaporware, a clever marketing stunt, but the live demonstrations, the irrefutable numbers, and the enthusiastic testimonials from Vance Innovations' pilot partners made his claims ring hollow. He attempted to rally his remaining team, promising a counter-innovation, but the spirit was broken. The deep technical knowledge, the innovative spark that had once defined Innovatech, had walked out the door with Silas. Without Nexus Core, and without the strategic foresight to recognize its value, Innovatech was left with an outdated infrastructure, a rapidly shrinking client base, and a deeply demoralized workforce. Julian's attempts at damage control were clumsy and desperate. He issued rambling public statements blaming a rogue former partner for unethical competitive practices, but the patents were clear, and Silas's actions were entirely within legal bounds. The narrative that solidified in the public consciousness was one of hubris and short-sightedness. Julian, the charismatic leader, had prioritized ego and immediate profit over long-term vision and true innovation, ultimately discarding the very genius that had built his empire. The regret from others in the industry was palpable. Some of Julian's closest allies, who had previously lauded his bold decision to let Silas go, now publicly distanced themselves, or privately expressed their shock and dismay at Julian's monumental miscalculation. A few of Innovatech's long-standing clients, upon seeing the undeniable capabilities of Nexus Core and witnessing Innovatech's decline, discreetly began inquiries about transitioning their business to Vance Innovations. The momentum was irreversible, a tide that Julian could not stem. Silas didn't gloat. There was no need. The facts spoke for themselves, a testament to years of quiet, meticulous work. Julian's defeat was not a result of Silas's direct attack, but of Julian's own making, a consequence of his ingrained flaws. He had built a house on sand, mistaking charisma for foundation, and when the tide came in, it was destined to crumble. Silas's quiet comeback wasn't about vengeance. It was about revealing the truth, about proving the intrinsic value of innovation, and about showing that true strength lies not in outward charisma, but in quiet, persistent genius and unwavering integrity. The storm had hit, and Innovatech was caught in its destructive path, while Vance Innovations was sailing steadily forward on a course Julian had never seen coming, a course Silas had charted in secret. Months turned into a year, then two. The dust, finally, settled into a new landscape. Vance Innovations soared, establishing itself as the undisputed leader in secure, high-speed data processing. They expanded globally, their technology becoming the industry standard, revolutionizing how data was handled across various sectors. Silas's vision, once dismissed as academic pipe dreams by Julian, became the foundation of a new era of digital infrastructure, a testament to the power of true innovation. He was no longer the silent partner, the unseen architect. He was the recognized architect of a technological revolution, a quiet visionary whose work spoke for itself. Silas's life, while still demanding, found a profound sense of balance. The pressure to constantly innovate remained, but it was a joyful pursuit, unburdened by corporate politics or the need to constantly justify his worth to a short-sighted ego. He surrounded himself with brilliant, like-minded individuals who shared his passion for pushing boundaries, for solving complex problems with elegant solutions. The Vance Innovations office buzzed with creative energy, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere he had left behind at Innovatech. He still preferred the quiet of the lab, the deep dives into complex problems that consumed his intellect, but now he did so with the knowledge that his work was valued, truly valued, by every person around him. Julian Thorne's fate, meanwhile, was a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Innovatech Solutions, stripped of its core intellectual property and bleeding talent, floundered irrecoverably. They tried to pivot, to rebrand, to launch new marketing campaigns, but without a foundational technology to compete with Nexus Core, their efforts were futile. The company eventually dissolved, acquired for pennies on the dollar by a smaller competitor primarily interested in their client list, not their outdated technology or Julian's hollow promises. Julian, once the industry's golden boy, faded into obscurity, his name whispered not with awe, but with a mix of pity and scorn. He attempted a few more ventures, but they all crumbled, his reputation as a short-sighted opportunist preceding him. The charisma that once captivated boardrooms could not compensate for his fatal flaw, an inability to recognize true value when it didn't wear a shiny, immediate price tag. Silas saw him once, years later, at a casual industry event he attended reluctantly, drawn by a specific technical presentation. Julian was a shell of his former self, his once impeccable suit now ill-fitting, his eyes hollow, devoid of the old fire. He avoided Silas's gaze, shrinking into the background, a ghost of his former boastful self. There was no animosity, no lingering resentment on Silas's part, just a quiet understanding of how different paths, chosen by different values, can lead to vastly different destinations. Silas's journey taught him a profound lesson. True value is not always immediately recognized or loudly celebrated. Sometimes, it's cultivated in silence, refined through meticulous effort, and often dismissed by those who prioritize superficiality and fleeting gain. It taught him that integrity and patience are powerful forces, capable of outlasting arrogance and greed. It reinforced the belief that true innovation, when protected and nurtured, will always find its moment to shine, regardless of the obstacles. And perhaps most importantly, it showed him that sometimes the greatest act of self-preservation, and indeed the most powerful comeback, is simply to keep building, keep innovating, and let your work speak for itself. For the quiet brilliance, the unseen effort, often holds the most disruptive power of all. If you found Silas's story of quiet triumph over betrayal inspiring, then you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to unraveling more tales of justice, resilience, and profound life lessons that echo the very core of human experience. Don't miss out on these incredible journeys. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new story of vindication and wisdom unfolds. And now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a similar act of ingratitude or short-sightedness in your own life or career? How did you respond? Or, if you were in Silas's shoes, what would your ultimate comeback plan have been? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going.